Hello, my name is Keith Christensen. I am a professor in the Department of Landscape Architecture and Environmental Planning, and I am excited to talk to you today about universal design, or designing for the independence and equality of individuals with disabilities and other disadvantaged populations. Now, this is going to be a little bit weird because I'm used to cracking these incredibly funny jokes and having nobody laugh. But this time there's no one in the room with me, so no one I won't even get the pity laugh, so I'm a little nervous about that. But hopefully you will find some of these things that we'll discuss, or some of these examples, to be a little bit funny, and you feel free to go ahead and laugh on your own, or maybe send me a message and tell me you thought it was funny. So, because these jokes are really good. But so as we talk about universal design, I want to actually step back, and I want to start with talking about decades ago. If you see this particular image, you might see that on this little cafe, the little farmer's cafe, that there are two doors. One is labeled white and one is labeled colored. Now this would suggest to you that this, plus it's a black and white image, and that hamburgers were 5 cents. But this would suggest to you that this image, this picture, was taken some time ago. And really this was in the era of civil rights, or segregation. This was a period of time where the idea was that separate was equal, and that it was acceptable to have separate services, separate facilities, separate institutions, as long as they were equal. So you could have one door that said white and one door that said colored, as long as you had 2 lunch counters and equal services. And it could be separate as long as it was equal. Now, the problem with that is one that, as you can see from this image, with the white drinking fountain and the colored drinking fountain, separate but equal is never equal. And we came to understand as a society that segregation is a violation of your human rights. Separate but equal is never equal. It's never the same. And it is wrong and inappropriate to design according to segregative principles, or to plan for that. We don't do that on the basis of race or ethnicity. We wouldn't find that to be appropriate. This image that I'm showing now is the Salt Lake International Airport. And if you'll look at this is the men's drinking fountain and the women's drinking fountain. Now, of course, that's not actually the men's drinking fountain or the women's drinking fountain. But when I saw that, I had to take a picture because I thought it was kind of interesting, and then would sit there while I was waiting for my plane and basically correct people that were using the wrong one to see the expression on their face. Those signs are for the restrooms, not the drinking fountains, because we would understand that we wouldn't practice segregative design on the basis of gender either. This would be, segregation, or the idea of separate but equal. It's never equal. And we do not practice planning or design that's segregative. We wouldn't do that. However, for people with disabilities, we do it all the time. From this image that you see here is the main entrance to an academic building of some type, and then there's the little sign that says, for a particular type of person, there's a separate but equal entrance for you. And that entrance might be at the back of the building, down some dark alley or something like that, not as easy to get to. Separate but equal is never equal. But we practice segregation in design for individuals with disabilities all the time. We know that it's inappropriate, yet we keep doing it. And the question is why? Why do we keep doing that? And some of it is because we don't pay attention. We don't really understand what we are doing. And some of it is because we have a misunderstanding of what a disability actually is. At one point in time, disability was understood according to what's called the medical model of disability. And that really is that people with disabilities were defective and were in need of being fixed. They were broken, they were defective, there was something wrong with that individual, and we needed to fix whatever was defective or broken or wrong. And if we couldn't fix that, we would basically practice segregation. We would exclude, segregate, deny services, but we were not addressing the real root of the issue. We don't think about disability in this way any longer. That's not the way that we view disability. But there are still times and practices where this old model of disability is still kind of baked into the way that we do things. And when we talk about planning or design, often this really antiquated way of thinking about an individual with a disability is still fairly common. And it's part of our codes and ordinances and regulations, which are often quite old. But so it's kind of baked in there. But what we have to understand is the failure to really consider the interests and needs of people with disabilities when we design or plan the built environment produces policies that seem incompatible with their human rights. And indeed, they are incompatible with their human rights because we practice segregation, and that's not appropriate. Separate but equal is never equal. So we need to really understand what a disability is in order to address this problem. And disability is a natural part of the human experience, and that it in no way diminishes an individual's right to fully participate in every aspect of society. Disability is natural. There is natural variation in the human condition, and that variation shouldn't impact your ability to fully participate. So we understand that if disability is natural, we need to fix the environment, not the individual. There's nothing defective, broken, with the individual because variation is normal in our human condition. Now, I have a very specific way of looking at this, and I kind of want to walk you through it just a little bit so you understand it, understand this core principle that's so important when we try to understand what a disability is. So I use this diagram, and I want to kind of reference this a little bit. But on this diagram, there is a kind of continuum of function, and everyone is somewhere on that. Everyone has different functional competencies. So the person's abilities or their functional competency, yours can be here, someone else's could be here, mine could be here. We're all over the place on this because variation in the human condition is natural. So our functional competencies are all over kind of this functional continuum. And what's more, they're always in motion as well. Sometimes your functional competencies are declining, perhaps with age or injury or some other reason. Sometimes your functional competencies are increasing for various reasons. Perhaps you're attending a university class and increasing your knowledge and understanding, and your functional competency would be increasing. So we see these functional competencies increase and decrease and move around, and they're kind of all over the place, and that's natural. That's normal. That's what we would expect to see. Now, at the same time, everything that is created by people, by humans. Every time something is created, designed, planned, created, regardless of what it is, one fundamental aspect of the creative process is that we establish the functional demands required to participate in whatever we've created, whether it's a service, whether it's an environment, whatever it happens to be, we establish the functional demand in order to take advantage of that service or be in that environment, whatever it happens to be. So we establish part of being of creation essentially is establishing these functional demands. We set them. We determine where it's going to be. If you want to participate in this class and view this lecture, There are particular functional demands that we've established. You must be able to do this in order to participate in this discussion. Whenever the functional demands are higher than the functional competencies of the individual, that gap, that misalignment, that's what a disability is. It's the misalignment between what is functionally demanded and the functional competencies of the participant. That gap, that misalignment. Disability is an experience. It's not a thing that you have. Disability is an experience that you have because your functional competencies are misaligned with the functional demands of whatever it is you're trying to participate or do or be involved in. If you understand disability that way, you know that disability, that as an experience, will come and go. And you will sometimes, people will sometimes have disability experiences that you might not think of as a person with a disability. For example, if you want to fully participate in this suburban environment, all right, you're 10 years old and you want to fully participate in the suburban environment, what do you need? To really fully participate in life in suburbia, you need access to private transportation. You need a car, all right, in order to participate in that. If you do not have access to a car, you are not able to fully participate. The functional demands of the suburban environment are higher than your functional competency. So if you're 10 years old and you don't have access to a car and you would like to go to the park to play with your friends, you might not be able to because you can't get there because you don't have a car. The functional demands are too high. And being not able to fully participate is that misalignment and that disability experience. You might be older. You've lived in this environment for decades, and now you've reached the point in your life where perhaps it's more difficult for you actually to drive. Maybe you don't drive as well at night or anything else, but you're not able to drive as well, and all of a sudden you start to have this same experience, this same disability experience of being unable to fully participate because the functional demands of the environment are misaligned with your functional competencies. So it'll change. It'll come and go, it'll change, but it's that disability experience. And we need to understand disability as an experience and understand what creates or causes it so that we can address that. And the approach when we look at that, well, I'll back up a little bit and just say, so when I talk about a disability, I'm not really talking about what you might stereotypically think of as a disability. There are individuals with disabilities. We refer to them as an individual with a disability. What we're really doing is acknowledging that we suspect that this individual is often confronted with this misalignment. We see this individual as someone who probably can't fully participate because of this misalignment. Now, we can mistakenly attribute that inability to fully participate to the individual, that they are defective or broken. That is an antiquated medical model of disability. That's not the case. What we should understand and recognize is that the environment, the product, the service that we have created is setting functional demands that are inappropriate for the individuals who wish to participate, to be in that environment, to make use of that service, to use that product. We have to understand that it's the other side. It's the environment that we need to address. Now, there are people that identify as being an individual with a disability because they are confronted with this misalignment all the time. And if you're continually finding it difficult to fully participate in all aspects of society, you begin to identify as an individual with a disability. And that is very real. But they're identifying with the experience of essentially having a disability. People who create any product, service, or environment. And I'm kind of specifically talking about, architects, landscape architects, planners, designers, people who are creating the built environment. But it doesn't matter if it's the built environment or a product or a service, whether it's a math test or some other little widget you're selling on Amazon, or a park or a plaza or some open space. Whoever's creating or establishing these functional demands have to understand that the design of the built environment or the product or the service is a fundamental statement about valuing other individuals and understanding the functional demands that you are imposing on people with a broad range, a natural variation in the human condition. It's not about complying with the ADA, meeting necessary legal standards. That's not what it's about. It's about understanding people and their capabilities, their functional competencies, and the demands that you are imposing through whatever it is that you are creating. So we look at this, and our first approach should be, let's address the environment. Now I'm going to show a little video here that you'll get to watch for a few moments. There's no sound to this video. It's just a little product demonstration video that I've had for a while. And if you can see this, this is an awesome wheelchair. Some people refer to it as the iBot, but it was the Independence 3000 is the one that you're seeing in the video. There are subsequent ones, and this wheelchair is awesome. It will drive over a pile of firewood, because I guess often you have the need to drive over a pile of firewood. But it'll do that. It'll handle very rough terrain. It'll basically drive up this ramp, which is way too steep to be in compliance with minimum standards, but that doesn't matter. It'll go right up it, and it'll kind of level out the chair as you're going so that you're a little more seated stably. It turns on a dime and gives you 9 cents change, and that's my awesome joke that no one ever laughs at. And then it gets really cool. As you can see from this, it'll go up and down stairs. Now, you don't just use the joystick and basically drive off the stairs and it catches you and stops you from falling to your death. But you go to the top of the stairs, you put it in its stair mode, and you will rock it forward and it'll go down a step, or you rock it back and it will go up a step. So you do have to have kind of the gross mobility in order to rock it forwards or backwards in order for it to do one step function. For instance, if you don't have that gross mobility, someone can assist you. They're not really doing any work other than they're tipping the chair back, so it will make one step back, or they're tipping the chair forward slightly so that it would make a step forward. So it's a great chair. It'll handle stairs. If you can't reach something, it's got a seat elevator built into it. It'll lift you up a little bit, which is great. But then it gets really cool. And what you are seeing here is called the standing function. It will stand you up on 2 wheels. Now, as you look at this, I will tell you that all the technology developed for this chair is what eventually went into the Segway scooter, and then now has made its way into things like hoverboards, this kind of self-balancing technology that was developed for this wheelchair originally. And it's great. I mean, you could jump in and out of the chair and it won't tip over, kind of thing. But so it's really handy. You can get you up to pier height, and it's a great chair. But the question is, how much does it cost? And the answer is a lot. The most recent figure that I had for this was about $47,000 for this wheelchair, independent of any specialized seating that might be necessary. That is a significant cost to place on an individual to help them navigate the built environment. What we're doing there is focusing on fixing an individual so that they can participate in the environment. So we require one individual to purchase a $47,000 wheelchair. Our first approach should be to remove the barriers in the environment so it's not necessary for any individual to purchase a $47,000 wheelchair. All right. This is a good example of assistive technology, and assistive technology is absolutely appropriate once every unnecessary functional demand in that environment, product, or service has been removed. Once you've removed everything that you can that will be a barrier to individuals, and sometimes you can't remove everything. But once you've removed everything you can, that's when it's appropriate to use assistive technology, not at the beginning. We don't basically create conditions that are expensive in time, resources, all kinds of things for one individual to participate. We look to create an environment that has the most appropriate functional demands for as many people as possible to participate without the use of a $47,000 wheelchair or anything similar to that. The process for doing this, or one process for doing this, is called universal design. It is the design of products and environments, and I would say services as well, the design of products and environments to be usable by as many people as possible without the need for a $47,000 wheelchair or some other form of specialized design. All right. The focus of universal design is to address the environment. The emphasis is not on fixing the individual. The emphasis is looking at the demands of the environment, these functional demands, and eliminating those that are not necessary. Some are necessary. They're fundamental to what the product, the service, or the environment is. But there are many that are not. And you have to understand what ones are necessary and what ones aren't necessary. The ones that aren't necessary are simply barriers to the participation of individuals. They're creating a disability experience, and you need to identify them and remove them so that the functional demands are appropriate to the functional competencies of the individual and the product, the service, or the environment that you're creating. So one of the universal design approach for doing this is to ask yourself essentially 7 questions, to consider 7 different things. We talk about them as the principles of universal design. Every time you create something, you ask yourself these 7 questions or consider these 7 principles as you create, all right, as you design a product, a service, or an environment. They are how you will identify the unnecessary demands. I'm going to go through each one of these fairly quickly, but we'll talk about each one of them, and I want to give you just a few examples so you can see what we might be referring to. The first one, we talk about equitable use. To me, this is the simplest one. You ask yourself, are you segregating? Anything that you're doing, are you segregating? All right. Because really segregating it's the question of who belongs in this environment, who gets to use this product, who gets to to benefit from this service. All right. You're asking who belongs. You don't want to segregate, and you need to make sure that the same means of use, the same safety, privacy, security, all those things are equal for anyone who would want to participate in whatever it is you're creating. So this is the example that I've used before. This is segregation through design. And it could have very good reasons for doing it, but it doesn't matter how good the reasons are. They're all still inappropriate because it's segregating. But if you look at this, perhaps this is the main entrance to, we'll say, the library. And you need to go study at 1 o'clock in the morning because that's pretty typical. All right. What entrance do you want to use? One of them is the main entrance, which has higher traffic. So it's considered to be peopled and safer. It's well lit. The architecture of the building has been designed so it's understandable to you once you enter the building. But the other entrance might be in the back. It's not well lit. It's probably locked. Nobody ever uses it. It comes in by the mechanical rooms or the custodial closet, and it's hard to kind of make your way through the building once you're there. The privacy, the safety, the security, they're not the same experience. Separate but equal is never equal. So we avoid segregation. If the way that people with disabilities are expected to get into a building is around the back, past the garbage, and through the kitchens, what message does that communicate about whether or not a person with a disability is wanted in that environment or belongs in that environment, or how we might feel about them? How does that make them feel? All right. So we can do this differently. This is just one example where we've got the same environment. One is what we often see. There's 3 doors, but there's a ramp on one of them. One of them is an accessible entrance. The other one's been designed so that they're all essentially accessible entrances. What's better? You know, you would think, and I would hope that you would identify the one where it is more inclusive, does not segregate, to be the better design. Which one costs a little bit more? This is a bit of a trick question. In the short term, initially, it will cost a little bit more to design something that does not segregate. But in the long run, it costs a lot more to design something that does segregate, because you're kind of adding on to it. It's a Band-Aid approach. It causes more maintenance issues, and in the long run, it will cost you a lot more to segregate than it will cost you to include at the beginning. Here's another example of just someone's home, and typical home looks great, other than the sidewalk from the driveway kind of slopes down, and there's one 4-inch step to get onto their porch and a 4-inch step to get into their home. Why is that 4-inch step there? There's no reason for it to be there, other than when the home was designed, no one thought of that as a barrier. It's not a problem for anyone. However, perhaps the people that live here are going to age, as we tend to do. And at some point, that little 4-inch step might actually become a barrier to their using their own home. And then they can no longer live here. They've got to go live somewhere else. Or we've got to create another solution, an expensive solution, to remove something that should have been done correctly at the beginning. You don't want to create segregative design. This, to me, is the perfect example of what segregation looks like. This is the map for the subway system in London, the tube, all right, that you use to get all around the community. There's all the stops and every place you can go, and you can get around the community of, the city of London really well using the subway system. It's nicely designed. Unless you happen to have a disability that requires accommodation, and then the same system looks like that. It's an extremely different experience getting around London if you have a disability versus if you don't. It costs you more money, more time, more resources, more stress to get around London if you have a disability versus not having a disability. Same system, extremely different experience. That map is a map of the disability experience. I just think this one is funny because the accessible restroom happens to be up the stairs. Tell me how that works. And even more interesting, if you happen to be female with a disability, you're just totally out of luck. So we've got all kinds of segregation going on here, which I'm sure that something here is wrong. There's a lot of things wrong here. I just think it's a funny example. The second principle of universal design that I would like to discuss is flexibility in use. And that, in addition to not segregating, flexibility in use really means that you're trying to address that variation in the human condition as much as possible by providing or accommodating just the range of preferences and that variation in individuals. Just trying to be adaptable in what you're designing or creating so that more people can participate and take advantage of whatever it is that you've created. A wonderful example of this that I like to use is pretty common. If you happen to be right-handed, and the majority of people are right-handed, if you recall a time where you ever accidentally reached into the box of scissors and pulled out the left-handed scissors without knowing it. If you're right-handed and you've tried to use left-handed scissors, you would think that you'd skipped kindergarten or you had forgotten how to cut. It is very difficult to do that. And we might find it annoying. But people who are left-handed experience this all the time. All right, because it's right, the environment's been designed for right-hand dominance. Being left-hand dominant basically creates conditions where you experience this misalignment in functional demands because things aren't made to be used right-handed or left-handed. Scissors is a great example. And Fiskars, kudos to them, developed scissors that could be used left-handed or right-handed. It didn't matter how you used it. And that's makes a difference. There's all kinds of things that if you've never thought about it, like an ice cream scoop, and you happen to be left-handed, the experience is very different. That's not a lot. That is not a ice cream scoop and a left-handed individual would prefer to use. Now you can say, well, you should just learn to use the right-handed one. And lots of people have to do that. But that's not what we're trying to do. That's trying to fix the individual, to force them to use their non-dominant hand to participate. You're trying to fix the individual. We try to fix the environment first so that we don't run into these kinds of conditions. There's some interesting things. This is a little billboard that basically said right-handed people live longer than left-handed people. Now, I've immediately stressed out everyone who's left-handed, although there is some research that indicates this because everything's a little bit harder to do because you are left-handed living in a right-handed world. It's a little bit harder, so it kind of wears you out a little bit quicker and you might die a little bit earlier. Now, don't be stressed out if you're left-handed because then there are other studies that say that this is not the case. But the principle is true. It's harder if you're continually confronted with environments that don't meet your functional competencies. And people with disabilities face this to a huge extent. And it is very true that people with disabilities' life expectancies, independent of any medical condition, will be shorter. And that's inappropriate. We're shortening people's lives by not accommodating, all right, not thinking about their functional competencies. So in addition to people with disabilities, left-handers unite, raise your left hand in solidarity. We can create a better environment for people who are left-handed. But this, we think about the door at the grocery store that opens automatically. Honestly, my son loves these doors because he loves to sneak up on it and then use the force to open the door. They're great, but why do they open automatically? It's not necessarily to accommodate people with disabilities. It's because you're trying to accommodate a wide range of preferences of the user. They're carrying groceries or pushing a cart, and it would be nice if the door opened automatically because of what the user is doing. This is flexible. This design is flexible in its use. Ramps are flexible in their use. Lots of different kinds of people can use ramps more easily than stairs. It's not just people with disabilities. There's lots of reasons. But yet we often put in the ramp and the stairs. And I found this to just be a hilarious example of the new design where there's a ramp and stairs. It's complicated to actually build that when you could have just put in the ramp. And up at the top, it looks like the ramp ends in stairs, but the ramp goes off to the right in the image. Why do we have both when we could just use a ramp? There are very complicated stairs that can turn into ramps. Again, why would we do that when a ramp would just be more flexible in its use? This happens to be an idea for a picnic table so that you could have accessible seating at it. And, you know, you could slide the benches on this system of rails and sit wherever you wanted. And that's great, but it's complicated. And if you have your 3-year-old happens to walk in between the two benches and you slide them together, you might really hurt this child. It's complicated. So, you know, there's other approaches. We can make something more flexible by just removing the bench on one side. That's great until everyone sits down on the other side, and then it basically is a catapult for potato salad. So that's not the best approach. Here's another approach, and I hope you can see what is different in this approach. We've just moved the legs of the bench in further, so there's some space for somebody's knees so that they can use that picnic table. It makes the picnic table more flexible, right? It's not changing it a whole lot. And you're not going to really notice the change unless you need the change. You've just made it more flexible, and it's much better design. Now, if you've also looked at this, you may have noticed one of the other problems is that picnic table is also in gravel. So it may be wheelchair accessible, but the surface doesn't allow a wheelchair to get there, to use it. You have to think through all of it in order to do this. This is, you know, we have lots of doors where you have to push the button to open them. This is a new approach where you just have to wave your arm by it in order to open it. You don't actually have to push the button. You've just continued to make things more flexible as you've designed them. All right, the next principle, simple and intuitive. Whatever you design or create has to meet the user's expectations. It has to meet their expectations. It has to work the way that you would expect it to work. If it doesn't, if it's not consistent with user expectations, you create conditions that cause problems. I love this little video. You may want to rewind this a few times and watch it, but let's watch it through here once. Pay attention. All right. You want to see the individual that just walked into the glass. Why they walk into the glass? Let's look at this one more time. All right, watch it one more time. Now you know what to expect. That person is my hero because they got up and acted like nothing had happened. Great security camera footage. You know they went out to their car and cried. But let's think about user expectations. If the main door to get out of the building is over there on the left, where should the other door be? Directly aligned with it. All right, right in a line. You would expect it to be there. There is nothing on that glass panel that says there's no door here. And you know the people that work here keep that spotlessly clean because it brings them joy in life to see someone walk into this daily or hourly. Look at where the mat is, the little mat to get the dirt off your feet. It's aligned with where the door should be, not with where the door actually is. Everything about this environment says the door is here when it's not. It does not meet user expectations, and it causes conditions where basically you smash your face into a panel of glass. That's inappropriate design. And there's all kinds of examples of this. If you look at these door handles, do you push or do you pull to open this door? These are pull handles. That's what you would expect. That's what you've been conditioned to understand. They're pull handles. It doesn't matter that there's a sign that says push on it. No one is going to walk up and read the sign and then push open the door. They're going to walk up, see a pull handle. They're going to pull on it, pull on it, pull on it. Then they're going to read the sign, get angry, and kick it open. All right. If you need a sign, it is bad design. That's my little rhyme for today because I'm a poet and you didn't even know it. And I'm laughing at that, but no one else is. It's all good. So, all right. You don't want to make conditions that do not meet users' expectations. Sometimes they don't meet anybody's expectations, but you can design things that meet everyone's expectations. This is the pull-push door, the push door. It doesn't matter what you do, okay? You can get in. You can use this door. This image, I would like to go up in the elevator. Which button do I push? And I honestly ask you that question because I have no idea which call button you would push on this elevator in order to go up or down. Honestly, you push both of them and hope for the best. We can design better than this. This is a new one that I found. This one gives me a headache. But I would just like to go to a particular floor on the elevator, and I am not going to figure this out for all kinds of reasons. This is horrible design because you are not meeting users' expectations. All right? We should not communicate confusing or conflicting messages to our users. We need to meet their expectations. Otherwise, what we're really just saying is good luck. Now, and obviously this is a Photoshop sign on this one, but this one is not. And I want to share this example with you and tell you a little personal insight that my daughter uses a wheelchair. She attended her high school, one of the first events that she went to at her high school. She, went up the ramp that you can see there and into the building, and she participated. It was like a play. She went to a play or a drama performance of some kind. When it was over, I was there to pick her up. I want you to understand that as she comes tooling down this ramp from the main entrance and heading out into the parking lot. That sidewalk is coming right out into the parking lot, and the accessible parking is directly aligned with it. It is sitting right over here. And I've got the van door open and the ramp down, and I'm waving at her, and it's a great little moment. And she drives right off the curb and breaks her leg. Because where should the curb be? It should be aligned with the path, the expected path of travel. Why is it over here on the right? I have no idea. So that needed to be fixed. How would you fix this? Because you don't want anyone else breaking their leg. I personally found it upsetting. She found it extremely painful. And as a family, we found it very costly to basically have to go to the emergency room and all kinds of things for something that should have been designed correctly. So if you need to fix this, what would you do? You would take this curb cut and you would move it over here and put it in the path of travel, directly aligned. However, this is the approach. There is nothing so poorly designed that we cannot make it worse. And this is the worst approach. We have to do a better job at meeting users' expectations. This is a seat control for a power seat. You could reach down and, if you want the back of the seat to come forward, you push the back of the seat control forward. If you want the seat to come up, it meets users' expectations. It works the way you would expect it to work. The first time that these were basically put in place, what kind of car manufacturer do you think did this? It was a luxury car manufacturer, someone who pays attention to design. But now, my Town and Country minivan has one. This is a picture in a Hyundai, all right? Because good design is good design. If you pay attention to it, you discover the way of doing it. Talk about you meeting users' expectations in this environment. Individual with a visual impairment needs to navigate this crosswalk. Nothing about this is simple or intuitive, and we can do a much better job about designing these. I'm going to go through the rest of these pretty quickly here. Perceptible information, you need to communicate the necessary information in multi-sensory means so that everyone benefits from being able to get the message, all right? I just think this is a humorous example of a sign, and there's Braille on the sign to help you understand it's 309, but the material for the sign is this pebbly gravel, so I don't know how you're going to read the Braille in this. This is a sidewalk to nowhere, all right? This sidewalk was actually at the Utah School for the Deaf and Blind. So you would have people that would go out into these athletic fields or, recreation fields and now need to navigate back to this sidewalk. And have we done anything in a multi-sensory fashion to indicate where the sidewalk system begins? All right, how do you find your way back to that sidewalk? This is the control for a stove. In addition to where the dial is at with the little mark, it also lights up to tell you when it's on. That's nice. Multisensory means of accessing the information. This is a pedestrian system. Primary circulation is one particular color, pattern, texture. Secondary circulation is a different one. The crosswalk is raised in a different material than the roadway surface. Everything about here is communicating how to use this pedestrian network in multisensory means. We'll skip that one. This one I find comical because if you want to open the door, you push the red button. And if you want to close it, you push the green button. Wouldn't you expect the green is open, red is closed? All right. We have to think about the message in all sensory forms that we're communicating. I think this one's great. Alarm or stop. But if you notice the braille in this image, it's the same on either one of them. So which one is it? And then this. Take a look at that for a moment. And I hope you can recognize what these are. These are stairs. You're standing at the top of stairs and looking down. How hard is it to navigate those stairs because of the information that you're communicating? It's hard to know that they're there. This particular set of stairs just makes you dizzy, even looking at them. I would have a difficult time going up and down those stairs and knowing kind of where the edges are. This is another set of stairs. We do this all the time. And I love this one. That is probably the ultimate example. That also is a set of stairs. And if you can see that, that would be extremely difficult to navigate. Sometimes you can do it on purpose because you want to slow people down. They were having problems with people running in the hall, so they essentially created an environment where it looks like you shouldn't run, and it works. It keeps people from running in the hall. But you don't want to do that with not purposefully. You might look at this and think that's your greatest nightmare. That is specialized design for someone with a visual impairment. What also could they have done? They could have left the colors on it. You can have one design for the most variety of individuals to interact with or use. You can have colors as well as textures and patterns, and that would work just fine. This is a great example of a viewer of the fall color. In Tennessee here, they have these viewers to help people who are colorblind actually experience this fall color. It's a wonderful thing to do. You all have experienced a much more common example in that there are voice controls and audio menus in your devices. They're there under accessibility features, but were they developed to be accessibility features? No, they were developed because there was only one means of accessing the information on these devices visually. So someone was out driving their car and looking at their phone when they weren't supposed to, or they were jogging or other kinds of things, and they could only access the information visually, and they jogged into a telephone pole and got hurt or something like that. So we've implemented these other means of accessing information. Next principle, tolerance for error. All right, do you minimize the hazards of unintended actions or consequences? Is the penalty for failure low? All right, are you minimizing the hazards of misusing the environment, the product, or the service? We use this kind of design principle of tolerant of error all the time because it's the undo button. You make a mistake in software, you hit the undo button, no harm, no foul. All right? It's fine. But you need this undo button for life in a lot of situations because sometimes not only is the ramp too steep, but there are crocodiles at the bottom of it, and it is not tolerant of error. And this is at a wetland park in the wetland preserve on the east coast of South Africa near the Mozambique border. So you have a steep ramp with crocodiles at the bottom. It's not fake, it's real. And tolerant of error? No, not tolerant of error at all. It's the same as that. The example I used earlier, was that tolerant of error? Absolutely not. Not tolerant of error in any way. Why are the controls for the stove in the front? because you don't have to reach past the hot pots or pans in order to operate the stove. It's safer. It's much more tolerant of error. You're much less likely to burn yourself using this stove than one where the controls are in the back. And if you buy a nice stove, spend money on a nice stove, the controls are going to be in the front or on the side. For that reason, it's tolerant of error. If you buy a cheap stove, the controls are in the back because we do not care about the safety of poor people. And I will leave it at that. So, or this example, this is also not photoshopped. It's not fake. This is 5148 New Bridge Road, Fayetteville, Arkansas. There's a whole development of these that they've since had to fix by moving the sidewalk. But that sidewalk was way too steep. It was not tolerant of error. In fact, I'm amazed at how they were even able to pour the concrete for that sidewalk. But not tolerant of error a lot. And we look at that and go, that's amazing. No one would do that. People do that all the time. For individuals who use wheelchairs, the ramps are way too steep. It's not tolerant of error. It's the same situation. And sometimes it gets incredibly ridiculous, where you wonder that cannot be real, but it's real because we don't think about it. We're like, I've got a ramp, it's fine. It's not fine. It's not tolerant of error. This is a knife block that's tolerant of error. You can put the knife in the knife block any way you want. You don't have to put it in that little slot. Great design. This, tolerant of error. Those doors open outward. All right, so if I'm trying to get in there and the door opens outward, what keeps me from falling off of that concrete platform? Don't even get me started on the 3.5 to 4 inch lip at the bottom of the ramp. We know how ramps work, and that's not how a ramp works, but it's not tolerant of error either. The safest thing about this happens to be that brick, so that when I fall off of it, somebody can use the brick to put me out of my misery. That was a joke, by the way. No one's laughing, at least that I know of. All right, low physical effort, sixth one. It needs to be efficient and comfortable to be used. You need to make it so it's not difficult to use it. Reasonable operating forces, neutral body position, it needs to be comfortable to use. I'm sure many of you have had that experience when you went to open a door and the door was very difficult to open and you opened it with your face. There's a reasonable operating force for a door. And when a door is outside of that, problems happen. We need to make sure that things are not difficult to use, that they're comfortable. You can use them without fatigue. This is an example where the lid stays on the pot so that you can drain the water. You don't have to balance the plate and keep the macaroni in and avoid the steam. The lid will stay on the pot. This was one that was very expensive, and it was in basically a disability catalog. But you can buy these now all over the place on late night TV for like $20. And if you buy now, they'll throw in a free puppy. And the puppy will even survive shipping because of the lid has holes in it, so for air. And I've just insulted all puppy lovers. I apologize for that poor joke, but I still found it funny. Why is the dishwasher raised up? So you don't have to bend over as far. It's easier to use. And you will see these kinds of things. Lever handles. You don't have to grasp and twist to open the door. You can use gross mobility to open the door. This is a pen. It's much more comfortable to use. It's not the cheap pen that's really skinny and your hand cramps up when you use it. It's comfortable to use. Think about the amount of effort in order to negotiate that. You've got to get a run down that ramp so that you basically can bunny hop that median in the road. That is not a comfortable, low physical effort design. Neither is this for this lady. She would just like to get across the street. And you know that the sign on the other side is going to say, walk, walk, die, because she's not making it across that. The amount of physical effort to get across that street is very high, which is why you start to see things like this pretty commonly. And it's unfortunate and it's unsafe. And we shouldn't design environments that basically require people to do this kind of thing in order to get around. This is in Singapore. If you're elderly, you can actually tap your identity card on the crosswalk and it will give you an additional 3 to 13 seconds, depending, in order to get across the street. Less physical effort required. I would just like to get home, and getting home shouldn't be like a ride at Disneyland. All right, that's ridiculous. And there are other ways that we can approach things to make it less physical effort. Last one, size and space for approach and use. This is mostly what people think about when they talk about making things accessible for individuals with disabilities. You know, is the doorway wide enough? Is the bathroom stall larger so that you can transfer? Is the ramp the right slope? It's those kinds of things. But size and space for approach and use. Is there enough room to actually use this? And it's not, can you just get there? Can you actually participate? Because sometimes you can have your accessible seating and someone puts a sign in front of it. So yeah, I can sit there, but I can't actually participate in what's going on. So we're making these inconvenience stores. I just think that's a hilarious little joke. But this is a swing. And there's enough room that an individual can get on there and swing back and forth while they're using their mobility device. So there's enough size and space for approach and use. If I need to get to the button in order to open the door to get into this building, there's bikes. The bike rack's close and there's bikes around it. There's not enough size and space for approach and use. This is a fascinating example because as you come up the ramp, you push the button to open the door swings towards you. It's either going to push you back down the ramp or off the steps. It meets all codes, but there's not size and space for approach and use. You can't use it. And you have to think about those kinds of things so you don't get into these kinds of conditions. Or the sign that says, keep this area clear by making it so it's not clear. Just all kinds of fascinating examples. Or that's a beautiful ramp, probably required by code, but somebody left a telephone pole in the way and it doesn't actually go anywhere. You do not want to create environments that meet the minimum standards, but people can't actually go anywhere. They can't use them. So as you approach this, think about those 7 questions or 7 principles. Put into use universal design so that you are creating environments where the functional demands that you are creating are appropriate to the functional competencies of the individual and the product, service, or environment that you are creating. So thanks for participating. Appreciate you listening to this lecture, and hope to have a discussion with you in the future about this. Thank you.